Welcome to Real Estate Unfiltered, Singapore with Keith Tan. I'm Keith Tan, property advisor at ERA Realty Network, and this is where we cut through the noise and give you the honest insider read on Singapore property. No hype, no spin, just data, analysis, and real talk. Let's get into it.
Right now in Singapore, there are over 1,000 private condos sitting on this ticking clock.
Yeah, a very expensive ticking clock.
Exactly. They've officially crossed the 30-year mark. And the people living inside them are facing this massive dilemma about the actual lifespan of their homes. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at the fundamental tension that you as a buyer face in this market. It's that desire to find a comfortable home to actually live in versus the brutal reality of managing a depreciating mathematical asset.
That tension really is the defining characteristic of Singapore real estate. You're constantly trying to balance your day-to-day lifestyle with the underlying unforgiving math of land scarcity and leasehold decay.
All right. And to make sense of this, we are unpacking a really highly curated stack of research today from Keith Tan Property Insights. The mission here is to pull out the most vital, practical advice for you this week.
Whether you're a first-timer or an upgrader.
Yeah, exactly. Whether you're trying to get your foot in the door or figure out if you should hold on to your aging flat or make a move, we want to translate these complex market movements into plain language strategy, step by step.
And strategy is definitely the key word here, because if you don't understand the mechanisms driving these values, you can end up making a decision that feels right today, but completely traps your finances a decade from now.
So let's start with getting a foot in the door.
Mm-hmm.
Because the June 2026 BTO launch is massive. We are looking at nearly 7,000 flats. I think the number was around 6,000 to 900.
Right around there, yeah.
Now, for anyone newer to the mechanics here, BTO stands for build to order. You are essentially balloting for a heavily subsidized flat that does not even exist yet. You're buying a blueprint.
Which means you're dealing with years of waiting before you even get the keys. And that makes the location you choose today incredibly consequential. The June 2026 roster has a really fascinating mix.
Yeah, the locations are pretty varied.
They are. You have mature, highly established estates like Ang Mo Kio, Bishan, and Bukit Merah. And those are sitting right alongside non-mature options in places like Sembawang and Woodlands. The unifying theme across this entire batch, though, is strong MRT connectivity.
See, the moment I see Bishan and Bukit Merah on a BTO list, I instantly know what's going to happen. It's a psychological trap.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone zeroes in on those prime locations because they see the immediate convenience and they dream of the future resale value. But the competition is completely fierce. I always compare balloting for a mature estate to trying to get VIP front row concert tickets.
That is a very apt analogy.
Right, like everyone is refreshing the page, everyone wants to be right next to the stage. But if you put all your hopes on the VIP section, you might end up entirely outside the stadium, sometimes going for the stadium seats.
The non-mature options.
Yeah, the options in Woodlands or Sembawang, that is how you actually secure a spot and get to see the show. Strategy and managing expectations are vital here.
That analogy perfectly captures the danger of prioritizing preference over probability. New buyers often let the dream of a central location blind them to the mathematical odds of actually securing one.
Because the odds are brutal.
They really are. And if you continuously fail to ballot successfully because you only aim for Bishan, you aren't just losing time. You are losing out on years of potential equity growth. You have to objectively assess those location trade-offs.
And I was reading through the insights, and the administrative bottleneck here is also pretty staggering. You can't just, wake up on launch day, see an ad for a Woodlands flat, and decide to apply.
Not at all. The government timelines are incredibly rigid precisely because you are buying a subsidized asset. To even participate in a BTO launch, you need a valid HFE letter.
The HDB flat eligibility letter.
Exactly. It dictates exactly what grants and loan amounts you qualify for, but getting that letter approved takes a lot of time. For a June launch, realistically, you needed to have all your income documents sorted and submitted by mid-May.
So if you are listening to this right now and you haven't started the paperwork, you're already locked out of this round.
Pretty much. The system simply does not wait for you to make up your mind. First-timers have to align their personal housing timelines with the administrative reality. You have to be completely prepared on paper so that when the right balance of location and probability presents itself, you can actually strike.
So let's say you do strike. You play the game, you get your BTO, you wait for it to be built, you move in, and you stay for your minimum occupation period.
Hmm.
That's the mandatory 5 years you have to live there before you can sell.
Right, the MOP.
A lot of people hit that 5-year mark, get comfortable, and just stay. But the Keith Tan sources point out a really compelling reason why your first property is rarely your forever home. There is a ticking clock.
Complacency is the biggest wealth destroyer in leasehold real estate. I mean, once you settle in, you stop looking at the calendar. And that lease decay quietly eats away at your options.
The insights highlight a really fascinating case study about this exact scenario. It features a couple who recently upgraded from an aging 3-room HDB flat to a $2.3 million private condo at Highline Residence.
A very nice upgrade.
Oh, for sure. But the really instructive part isn't the flashy condo they bought. It's the reason they had to scramble to sell their HDB. Their flat only had 40 years remaining on its lease.
And that 40-year mark is the absolute danger zone.
Let's unpack the math behind that danger zone. Because it's not just some vague feeling that older flats are worth less, it's a structural financing cliff.
It really is a cliff.
When a property drops below 60 years on its lease, banks start pulling back. They severely limit the loans they'll issue. And then there are the CPF restrictions. Most Singaporeans use their Central Provident Fund retirement savings to pay for their homes, but the government aggressively protects those funds when it comes to older properties.
Right, because the underlying logic of the CPF board is that your home must last you for your entire life. So the rule is highly specific. The remaining lease of the property must cover the youngest buyer all the way up to the age of 95.
Age 95. That's a high bar.
It is. And if it doesn't cover you to 95, the amount of CPF funds you are allowed to use is heavily restricted. It's prorated based on how short the lease falls.
So, meaning if I'm a young buyer, in my 30s, looking at your 40-year lease flat, I can hardly use any of my CPF to buy it. And the bank won't lend me much either.
Which means the only way a buyer can purchase your aging flat is by coughing up a massive amount of cold, hard cash.
And who has that lying around?
Exactly. It dramatically shrinks your pool of potential buyers. To understand why banks and the government view this so strictly, we really need to look at a concept called Bala's curve.
Yeah, I saw this mentioned in the research. What actually is Bala's curve? It sounds like an economics textbook term.
It is essentially a discounting formula. It's used by the state to determine the value of leasehold land over time. The core assumption is that owning a 99-year leasehold property is essentially just paying rent in advance for 99 years.
Okay, that makes sense.
And what the curve mathematically illustrates is that the value does not depreciate in a straight line.
So it doesn't just lose 1% of its value every year.
Far from it. For the first few decades, the curve is relatively flat. I mean, a 90-year lease and an 80-year lease are valued very similarly. But as you cross the 60-year mark, and especially as you hit that 40-year threshold, the value falls off an absolute cliff. The depreciation accelerates exponentially.
Wow.
The asset is mathematically approaching zero, which is why bank financing dries up. The bank simply cannot secure a 30-year mortgage against an asset that is rapidly heading towards zero value.
I have to challenge this a bit, though, because you go online and you always see these sensational headlines about 40-year-old walk-up flats in Tiong Bahru selling for well over $1 million.
Oh, the $1 million HDB headlines. Always popular.
Right. Doesn't that prove that Bala's curve can be beaten? If a place has enough heritage charm, buyers will throw cash at it regardless of the math.
Those headlines are incredibly seductive, but they confuse the exception with the rule. Extreme scarcity, unique architectural history, or a hyper-coveted central location can temporarily mask the effects of Bala's curve.
So Tiong Bahru is just an anomaly.
Tiong Bahru is the ultimate outlier because they literally don't build flats like that anymore. But if your aging flat is a standard block in a standard town, if it's just one of 10,000 identical units built in the 1980s, you cannot bank on nostalgia to save your valuation.
The basic economics are going to catch up with you.
The economics of financing will always win out for 99% of properties.
So the takeaway for anyone listening who is sitting in an older HDB is that you need an exit strategy well before that 40-year mark. If you wait for the cliff, you're going to be trapped holding an asset that the next generation of buyers literally cannot borrow money to purchase.
Which forces you to sell at a significant loss just to get out.
Okay, so let's say you heed the warning. You sell the aging HDB, you beat the clock, and you buy a private condo. Problem solved, right? You've escaped the lease decay trap.
Not exactly.
Yeah, the sources show that upgrading isn't the end of the game. It is just stepping onto a totally different, potentially more expensive treadmill.
This is a harsh reality check for many upgraders. Escaping an aging HDB often means stepping right into an aging private development. And the financial mechanics of private condos are entirely different.
This brings us back to that staggering number from the intro. Over 1,000 private condos in Singapore are now over 30 years old. When you buy a resale condo, you are not just buying the four walls of your unit. You are buying a share in 3 decades of aging infrastructure.
Which requires massive capital to maintain. In a private condo, the maintenance is managed by the MCST, the Management Corporation Strata title, and they rely entirely on the monthly fees collected from owners.
Right.
When a building hits 30 years old, the lifts start failing. The underground plumbing deteriorates. The facade might need a complete overhaul just to meet modern safety standards.
And the MCST doesn't have a magical money tree to pay for a $1 million lift replacement. They come straight to the owners and levy a special assessment.
Exactly.
You could suddenly be hit with a bill for tens of thousands of dollars on top of your regular, already increasing maintenance fees.
Add to that the fact that a 30-year-old interior will likely require a massive gut renovation just to modernize the electrical wiring and plumbing inside the unit. The hidden holding costs are immense.
Knowing all of that, the next case study from the Keith Tan stack completely subverted my expectations.
The Tech family.
Yes, the tech family. Both parents work in the tech industry, and they deliberately ignored every piece of conventional wealth preservation advice in Singapore.
They really did.
The golden rule for upgrading is usually, buy high floor, buy as new as possible, and if you can, buy freehold.
That's the standard formula for optimizing your investment and minimizing depreciation.
Exactly. But this family did the exact opposite. They bought a ground floor unit in a 30-year-old, 99-year leasehold estate called Kentish Court, and they paid over $1 million for it.
It sounds totally counterintuitive until you look at the physical reality of the space.
They got 1,200 square feet. If you look at new condo launches today in central areas, finding 1,200 square feet without paying an absolute eye-watering fortune is near impossible.
It really is.
It wasn't just the floor space. Kentish Court has a super low-density environment.
Yeah.
There are only 77 units in the entire development.
This is a crucial historical point. 30 years ago, developers were not optimizing land to the absolute square inch the way they do today.
Yeah, they had more room to play with.
The profit margins were different, the land costs are lower, so older condos naturally offer a sprawling layout and a sense of breathing room that modern architecture simply does not accommodate, unless you're buying ultra-luxury.
The family also highlighted the community aspect. With only 77 units, they found this tight-knit neighborhood. And crucially, they noted that the condo rules felt less rigid. They didn't have to deal with the hyper-vigilant policing you sometimes see in modern mega developments.
Where neighbors complain if you leave a single pair of shoes outside your door.
Exactly. They bought a lifestyle, not a financial instrument.
But wait, aren't they just stepping right back into the exact same Bala's curve trap they just escaped from with their HDB? It's a 30-year-old leasehold.
They absolutely are.
Give another 10 years, and they're hitting that exact same 40-year financing cliff, but this time with high MCST fees attached to it.
You've hit the nail on the head. And it exposes the profound trade-off in real estate that nobody wants to admit. You often have to choose between investment optimization and practical living.
Right.
If your primary goal is maximizing capital appreciation and building generational wealth, then buying a 30-year-old leasehold condo is an incredibly risky, highly depreciating move.
Because the math doesn't care how friendly your neighbors are. Precisely. The math doesn't care. However, if your immediate priority is generous space to raise a growing family, day-to-day comfort, and a relaxed lifestyle, older condos are one of the only realistic avenues left for buyers on a budget. You are trading future financial optimization for present-day utility.
So it isn't necessarily a bad choice, as long as you aren't deluding yourself into thinking it's a brilliant investment.
You have to go in with your eyes wide open. You must aggressively factor in those rising MCST costs, the renovation burdens, and the absolute certainty that when you want to sell, your future buyers will face massive hurdles getting bank loans. If you plan to stay there for 20 years and consume the value of the home through living in it, it works. But it is not a stepping stone.
You're choosing the home over the asset, which
Yeah.
really shifts the perspective. Now, whether you buy that shiny new launch or the spacious 30-year-old contrarian condo, you cross a threshold. You become a private property owner.
Yes, you do.
And that means dealing with property taxes. The sources highlight some immediate practical relief coming up that we really need to talk about.
This is an incredibly important operational detail for anyone currently holding private property.
The government has announced a 2026 property tax rebate specifically for owner-occupied private homes. It is a one-off 10% rebate, and it's capped at $500. Now, let's explain the why behind this, because taxes haven't just randomly gone up. They are tied to something called annual value, or AV.
Right. The annual value is the estimated amount of money you could get if you rented out your property for a year. Over the last couple of years, market rental rates in Singapore surged.
They really spike.
And because rental rates surged, the annual values of almost all properties were adjusted upward by the tax authority.
So even if I live in my condo and I have zero intention of ever renting it out, the government calculates my tax based on this imaginary rental income. My AV goes up, my tax bill spikes, and I'm feeling the pinch without seeing any actual cash flow.
Exactly. And the government recognizes that this disproportionately hurts actual residents. The tax structure is primarily designed to capture wealth from investment properties and landlords. This 10% rebate is a targeted measure to soften the blow for people who are just trying to live in their homes while the broader rental market fluctuates.
But there is a massive catch. To get this rebate, the system relies entirely on your registered address. You must be an owner-occupier. If the system thinks you are a landlord, you get absolutely nothing.
The mechanism is highly literal. It does not matter if you physically sleep in the unit every night, if your official address with IRS...
The Inland Revenue Authority of Singapore.
Yes. If your address with IRS is not updated to reflect that property, you are classified as an investor.
Think of it like a loyalty discount at a grocery store. You can be their best customer, but if you don't scan the app, you don't get the savings. I cannot stress this enough. Do not leave a $500 rebate on the table just because you forgot to do 5 minutes of admin work online. Check your IRA's portal.
It connects to a broader philosophy of wealth preservation. Being a successful homeowner isn't just about timing the market perfectly or finding a contrarian gem like Kentish Court. It's about mastering the boring operational details.
The paperwork.
The paperwork protects the investment. Understanding how annual values work, structuring your financing to avoid the Bala's curve cliff, staying compliant with tax rebates. These administrative chores are the defensive maneuvers that keep your wealth intact.
That makes total sense.
You can make $500,000 in paper equity, but if you mismanage your holding costs, ignore your MCST obligations, or fail to optimize your tax position, you slowly bleed that equity away.
Looking at the entire picture we've covered today, it really is a delicate balancing act. You have to start with realistic expectations like looking past the Beshan BTO hype to secure a flat in Woodlands. Then you have to stay hyper-vigilant about the calendar, exiting your HDB before that 40-year lease decay cliff destroys your buyer pool. And if you upgrade, you have to honestly decide if you are buying a private condo for strict capital appreciation, or if you're willing to take on the heavy maintenance costs of a 30-year-old development just to get some breathing room.
And you have to do all of that while keeping your tax admin flawlessly up to date.
Definitely. Before we wrap up looking at all this data, what is one final thought our listeners should be mulling over this week?
Well, as new developments continue to shrink in size to maximize developer profits, and as those 1,000 existing condos keep getting older, I think Singapore is heading toward a fascinating tipping point.
Oh, how so?
Right now, age is seen as a financial liability due to lease decay and maintenance. But as living space becomes increasingly scarce and claustrophobic in the future, will the sheer square footage of these massive aging condos eventually trump their age? Will space become such a highly coveted luxury that buyers simply stop caring about Bala's curve?
Will space eventually trump age? That's a great question. If the tech family at Kentish Court is any indicator, that shift might already be starting. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Keith Tan Property Insights. The rules of the market are constantly shifting, but the more you understand the underlying math, the better equipped you are to find a home that actually works for you. Keep exploring, keep thinking critically about your own property journey, and we'll catch you next time.
That's a wrap for today. If you found this useful, share it with someone who's thinking about buying, selling, or investing in Singapore property right now. You can reach me directly on WhatsApp at +65 9750 1055 or find me on WeChat at keithtanbk. Visit keithtanbk.com for more market insights. I'm Keith Tan, and this is Real Estate Unfiltered Singapore. See you in the next one.